laws also puts TikTok on notice. The platform could be banned in the United States unless its Chinese owner, ByteDance, sells its operations to an American company. Now, TikTok says it plans to fight the, quote, unconstitutional measure in court. CEO Shu Chu says he believes it's a fight TikTok will win. Listen.
TikTok gives everyday Americans a powerful way to be seen and heard, and that's why so many people have made TikTok part of their daily lives. Rest assured, we aren't going anywhere. We are confident and we will keep fighting for your rights in the courts. The facts and the Constitution are on our side, and we expect to prevail again.
Adam Kovacevic is the founder and CEO of the tech trade group Chamber of Progress. Its partners are Meta, Google, and Apple, among other tech companies. Thanks so much for weighing in on this. You know, it's clear that this bill is now off the president's desk and headed straight to court. That's TikTok's best defense, right? Because the fact is most social media companies, including, you know, your partners, they rely on the First Amendment, the right to free speech.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that what we're going to see happen next is really three tracks on the TikTok story kind of running in parallel. The first, as you say, will be this judicial track. TikTok will file suit against this law probably relatively quickly. They'll go to court. That might even end up at the Supreme Court over the next couple months. And they will assert that this law violates they and their users' First Amendment rights. Now, I think that's an open question. There are people who feel strongly on both sides of that. It's worth noting that we have precedent for this, that even under the Trump administration, the gay dating app Grindr actually came under ownership by Chinese parent company. The Trump administration demanded that it be sold. There was a concern that having that kind of user data in the hands of the Chinese government could lead to problems. And, you know, also we've, kicked out essentially companies like Huawei from the United States on national security grounds. So I think you'll see the government making a national security argument, but at the same time there'll be a debate about that. We'll see a kind of a conversation about who could afford to buy TikTok if it's sold, and whether the Chinese government will even allow it.
I want to ask you, we talk about the security risk often, but let's face the facts, even the Biden-Harris campaign is on TikTok. I just want you to listen for a second.
Donald Trump still thinks windmills cause cancer. That's what he said.
You know, he's obviously using this to get to those viewers, those users, those very valuable young people that he's hoping to reach. And yet we hear that it's a security risk. So given Meta, Google, and many others have been taken to task as well, right, for privacy and data leaks, harms to youth, election interference, what's the difference here? What's the distinction between the fact that this is Chinese owned?
That's exactly the distinction. And this is really almost unprecedented territory. We've never before seen an app, particularly a social media app, be as successful in the United States and be Chinese owned. And Congress clearly has two types of concern about that. One is Chinese companies under Chinese law are required to turn over user data. The Chinese government doesn't have to go through due process. They don't have to get subpoenas to do that. The company is really expected and conscripted to advance Chinese aims. But the second really has to do with TikTok as a propaganda tool, potential propaganda tool for the Chinese government, and reflecting the content wishes and preferences of the Chinese government in terms of how much content is available on TikTok. And that's also a concern. I think you've seen Congress say things like, we would have never let the Soviet Union own a US television station in the midst of the Cold War. And there's a similar type of concern about the Chinese ownership of TikTok.
Yeah, we certainly wouldn't expect any reciprocity, and there isn't, although perhaps companies like Apple, right, might be a little bit concerned about the chill over Chinese retaliation on this, right?
Well, in fact, we saw this last week. So China directed Apple to block WhatsApp and I think it was Facebook Messenger and Threads from the App Store as a retaliation. But the thing is, those apps aren't available in China to begin with. So it's a little bit of a false threat, a little bit of posturing, which only really serves to highlight that America's leading social media networks and content services like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube have been blocked in China forever. Most of those services have never been able to operate in China. And so there's also, I think, a belief by some in Congress that here in the US, we maybe have been chumps a little bit. We've given access to the Chinese to our market, and they've denied us market access all along. And that's been an undercurrent in the debate as well.
Can we bring this down to earth, though? I mean, this could be in court for years. TikTok could remain on millions of phones, really, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It's a possibility, right?
Well, the law says that app stores and ISPs, so AT&T, Verizon, are prohibited from hosting it unless it is sold to an American owner within a year. And so I don't expect this will be a years-long question. I think the legal questions will probably be somewhat expedited as a result of that. And so you'll see federal courts ruling on that, I believe, somewhat quickly because of this year-long deadline. Then the question really becomes if the government succeeds in court, and I think they probably will, though I think it'll be a close call. Then the key question is, does the Chinese government allow TikTok to be sold? They've made a lot of posturing that they will not allow it to be sold. And I think there would be potential U.S. owners, potentially other companies, maybe investor groups. But there's a fair argument that the Chinese government might just say, look, we're not going to allow this to be sold. We actually viewed this as a national security asset in the first place. And if they don't allow it to be sold, candidly, I think it might end up reaffirming the concerns that Congress had in the first place that drove this law.
Yeah, in fact, Beijing has already put in those export controls, kind of anticipating what will happen. Adam, thanks so much. Really appreciate your insights.